It was during one of the tensest periods in human history, with the world on the brink of nuclear war and mutually assured destruction, that senior figures within the CIA had a daring and cunning plan, authorised by John F. Kennedy. The Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961 was a pivotal moment in the Cold War and the history of U.S. Cuban relations. It was the culmination of a series of significant events in the lead up to the invasion that greatly influenced its planning and execution. The main protagonist in this story is Fidel Castro, and with his rapid rise to power in Cuba in 1959 marking a turning point in the country's history. His revolutionary government quickly implemented a series of reforms, including land redistribution and nationalization of industries, which threatened the interests of wealthy Cubans and US corporations with investments on the island. As Castro's regime moved closer to the Soviet Union, it became increasingly antagonistic to the United States. This growing opposition to Castro's communist government led the US government to consider ways to undermine his rule. The CIA began working on covert operations to destabilize the Cuban government, and these efforts played a significant role in the lead-up to the invasion. The United States under President Dwight D. Eisenhower and later President John F. Kennedy authorized various attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro. These attempts included poisoning his cigars, using contaminated diving suits, and other clandestine methods. While these efforts did not succeed in eliminating Castro, they escalated the tensions between the two countries and contributed to the atmosphere of distrust. The assassination attempts underscored the determination of the US government to remove Castro from power and the lengths to which it was willing to go to achieve that goal. A few key factors led to the authorization of the invasion, with one being a man by the name of U.S Matos. He was a key figure in the Cuban Revolution, initially fighting alongside Fidel Castro's forces to overthrow the Batista regime. However, Matos soon became disillusioned with the direction of the revolution, particularly its alignment with communist ideology. In 1959, Matos resigned from his position as a commander in the Cuban Revolutionary Army and publicly criticized Castro's government. The U.S Matos affair highlighted growing internal dissent within the Cuban revolutionary leadership. Matos's vocal opposition to communism and his subsequent arrest by the Cuban authorities sent shockwaves through Cuban exile communities in the US. Matos's story was seized upon by anti-Castro groups and became part of a broader narrative used to justify United States support for anti-Castro forces. This detail and the obsession with Castro's removal played a significant role in shaping the decision to eventually launch the invasion. By early 1960, the Eisenhower administration had approved plans for a covert operation aimed at toppling Castro's government. The CIA trained and equipped a force of Cuban exiles to carry out the operation. The invasion was originally planned under the Eisenhower administration, but was launched during Kennedy's presidency. The Bay of Pigs invasion was seen as a necessity after the failure of assassination attempts and the presence of growing opposition movements like the one led by U.S Matos. These events set the stage for one of the most significant and ill-fated episodes in Cold War history. Preparation and planning. Preparation for the Bay of Pigs invasion, codenamed Operation Zapata, were carried out in utmost secrecy. The CIA, under the direction of Allen Dulles, developed the plan to train and equip Cuban exiles to serve as the primary invasion force. The hope was that this proxy army, composed of Cuban exiles who had fled Castro's regime, would overthrow the Cuban government, supported by US air cover and logistical assistance. The CIA trained the exile force at secret bases in Guatemala and Nicaragua, providing them with weapons, equipment, and military training. The expectation was that this covert operation would avoid direct US involvement while achieving its objectives. The Cuban exile force, known as Brigade 2506, was composed of approximately 1,400 fighters. These exiles came from various backgrounds, including former members of the Cuban military, professionals, and ordinary citizens who had fled Castro's rule. Their determination to liberate their homeland fueled their commitment to the mission. The leadership of Brigade 2506 included figures like Manuel Artime, José Pérez San Román, and José Rasco, among others. These leaders played a crucial role in organising and commanding the exile forces during the invasion. As the United States continued its covert preparations, Fidel Castro and his government were not oblivious to the growing threat of invasion. Castro's intelligence services had been monitoring exile activities, leading to increased security measures on the island. Furthermore, US authorities did not succeed in keeping the operation entirely covert. Rumours and reports of an impending invasion circulated, leading to heightened tensions. These warnings, however, did not deter the American planners. In the months leading up to the invasion, US policymakers engaged in diplomatic manoeuvring to justify their actions. President Dwight Eisenhower approved the operation during his presidency, but it was carried out under President John F. Kennedy's administration. One significant factor contributing to the operation was the desire to maintain plausible deniability. The United States sought to minimize its direct involvement, even as it was clear that the exile force had American support. Diplomacy was not neglected either. US officials tried to garner support from Latin American countries and the Organization of American States for their actions against Castro. However, their efforts were met with resistance from some Latin American nations wary of US intervention in the region. Operation Zapata. On April 15, 1961, the invasion force of Brigade 2506, equipped with US B-26 bombers painted with Cuban markings, launched an air attack on Cuban airfields. The hope was to eliminate Castro's air capability before the main amphibious assault on the Bay of Pigs. However, the element of surprise was lost. The Cuban government had been expecting an attack, and its air defences were prepared. The B-26s were intercepted, leading to the destruction of several aircraft and the loss of air superiority. The main invasion at the Bay of Pigs began on April 17, 1961. Brigade 2506, consisting of approximately 1,400 Cuban exiles, landed on Cuban shores, organised into 3 battalions, Alpha, Bravo and Charlie. The landing force was equipped with small arms, including rifles, submachine guns, as well as light artillery, like recoilless rifles and mortars. They also had a limited number of armoured vehicles and aircraft provided by the United States. The invasion plan involved 2 landing sites along the southern coast of Cuba, near the Bay of Pigs. The main landing point was Playa Giron, where Alpha and Bravo battalions were to disembark. Simultaneously, Charlie Battalion was tasked with securing an airstrip at Playa Larga, further to the east. The goal was to establish a beachhead, gather local support, and trigger a popular uprising against Castro's regime. Despite meticulous planning, the invasion faced several challenges, including lack of surprise, air superiority of the Cuban forces, and insufficient support from the local population. These factors ultimately led to the failure of the invasion, with the landing force unable to secure their objectives. In total, 118 Brigade 2506 members were killed, 360 wounded, 1,202 captured, and hundreds more executed. The US lost 4 personnel, 7 B-26 bombers shot down, and 2 supply ships lost. On the other side, the Cuban armed forces had 176 troops killed, with 400 to 500 wounded. Their national militia suffered more, however, with 2,000 killed or wounded, 1 B-26 bomber and 1 Hawker Sea Fury shot down, and multiple T-34 tanks and Su-100 guns destroyed. Overall, hostilities lasted only 3 days. The Bay of Pigs invasion was an unmitigated failure, with the exile force being comprehensively defeated. The operation laid bare the extent of US involvement, damaging its international reputation and increasing tensions with the Soviet Union. Aftermath. The invasion left an indelible mark on the history of US Cuba relations and the broader context of the Cold War. This failed secret operation had significant and far-reaching consequences that continue to reverberate today. In the immediate aftermath of the Bay of Pigs invasion, the consequences for the United States were dire. The Brigade 2506, composed of Cuban exiles, faced defeat and captivity at the hands of Fidel Castro's forces. The U.S. government, which had orchestrated the operation with hopes of plausible deniability, was exposed as the primary sponsor of the invasion. The world watched as American-backed exiles were defeated on Cuban soil, leading to international embarrassment and a blow to US prestige. The failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion had a profound impact on US-Cuba relations. Fidel Castro emerged from the invasion emboldened and solidified his grip on power. He used the failed invasion as propaganda, portraying himself as a resolute leader who had successfully defended Cuba against imperialist aggression. This event accelerated Cuba's alignment with the Soviet Union, as Castro sought protection and support from the Eastern Bloc against future US interventions. The US government's increasing hostility towards Castro's regime led to the severance of diplomatic relations between the two countries, a situation that persists to this day. One of the most alarming legacies of the Bay of Pigs invasion was its role in escalating tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. In 1962, just a year after the failed invasion, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba, aimed at the United States, triggered a perilous standoff between the superpowers. The Bay of Pigs invasion had convinced Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev that the United States was determined to overthrow Castro's government. As a response, he deployed nuclear missiles to Cuba as a deterrent. This critical moment in history, characterized by high-stakes diplomacy and the threat of nuclear conflict, underscored the global consequences of the invasion's failure. The Bay of Pigs invasion cast a long shadow over US-Cuba relations, leading to decades of hostility and strained diplomatic ties. The United States implemented a comprehensive economic embargo against Cuba in 1960, further isolating the island nation. This embargo has persisted for over half a century, affecting the lives of ordinary Cubans and shaping the Cuban government's policies. Efforts to normalize relations between the two countries have been made in recent years. In 2015, President Barack Obama took steps to restore diplomatic relations and ease some restrictions on trade and travel. However, these efforts have been met with mixed results, and the embargo remains largely intact. The Bay of Pigs invasion serves as a sobering reminder of the complexities and risks of foreign policy decisions, particularly covert military interventions. It highlights the importance of careful planning, accurate intelligence, and an understanding of the potential consequences. The legacy of the Bay of Pigs also underscores the significance of diplomacy and international cooperation in resolving conflicts. The Cuban Missile Crisis, born in the aftermath of the invasion, demonstrated the catastrophic potential of superpower rivalry and the urgent need for diplomacy to avert nuclear catastrophe. In conclusion, the Bay of Pigs invasion remains a pivotal chapter in the history of US-Cuba relations and the broader Cold War narrative. It stands as a cautionary tale of the unintended consequences of covert operations, the enduring impact of failed interventions, and the imperative of diplomatic engagement in addressing global challenges. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, then please give it a like, and for more amazing tales and thrilling stories, don't forget to subscribe to Uncovered Secrets. Also, hit the bell icon to stay notified for every release.